To start what we're doing today, our first step is going to involve colored pencil drawing. But before we do that, I like to activate my paint as the first step. The longer that these sit and absorb water, the more fluid and the happier they are to play along these paints will become. So to start, I'm just going to mist my watercolor down with a little bit of water on each of these palettes. So now these paints might be ready to go by the time I'm done drawing. They may have dried out again, in which case I can activate them again. It's not a problem, but sometimes I like to just start there. It allows me to dive into painting more quickly. So this is the spread that we did last time, and today I'm going to do another spread. This time we're going to handle the pages a little differently from the outset. So in this case, we did the same activity across both pages and then enhanced those pages in a different way. This time, I want to experiment with starting the pages with a slightly different strategy and seeing how the pages develop in their own different ways based on that. So to start, I'm going to open up my colored pencils. We have a lot of different color options here. So what I like to do is sometimes just pick some colors that relate in a certain way, or limit myself to maybe 4 or 5 colors that I just feel like using on that particular day. So I'm just going to pull maybe 4 of these out. And I'm going with 2 somewhat warmer colors, 2 somewhat cooler versions of those colors. And what I mean by this is that this green is informed by yellow and therefore somewhat warm, whereas this green is informed more by blue and is thus somewhat cooler relative to the first. This red purple is informed by red, and so therefore that is a little warmer, and then this purple is a little closer to blue, so therefore that is a little cooler relative to this one. So you do not have to choose your colors based on that metric, but that is sort of the rationale that I've used to pick these, and it's a very spontaneous decision. A lot of what we'll be investigating with drawing today has to do with spontaneity, so that sort of fits. To start my drawing process, I'm going to draw separately on each page, first on one, then on the other, and I'm going to use a slightly different strategy in both cases. So for the first page, and it doesn't matter which one you choose to work first, what I'm going to do is either close my eyes or look away, and I'm just going to draw open shapes that I'm not thinking about. So it's not a tight scribble necessarily, but it is sort of like scribbling. I guess what we're doing is scribbling slow and large across this page. How it looks is not important. It is important only that you give yourself a little bit of space in between lines, that you move your arm in a fluid fashion. So that is what this looks like. And right now, bear in mind, I'm not looking at this page at all. I'm just moving my hand in a way that feels good to me intuitively. And part of the reason I like to do things like this in my journal is that I feel like it's important to cultivate a little bit of space in our lives that really holds up to the old idiom of if it feels good, do it. I don't know about you, but that's not something that I often feel like the way my life is arranged encourages me to do. So I have to encourage myself to live like that a little bit And having my journal is a great way to cultivate and hold space for that kind of thing. So I encourage you, if you're making art, especially if you're new at it, to give yourself that gift and hold a little space for that mentality of, oh, if it feels good, just do it. And by not looking at my page, I really am able to do that. I'm going to switch to the second version of that color for my sort of second pass at this kind of drawing. And something else that is sort of important, I think, in this case, is to feel for the edge of your page so that you're really using the full potential of the space that you have in front of you. Okay, I think that is about as good as that's going to get. So I'm fine with this. Maybe I want a little more mark making down in this corner, and it's okay to observe, go back, and just flesh out something if you don't feel like you've really covered it. Make a change if something just doesn't sit right with you at this point. That's totally fine. So this is what I have on this page. And this, how would you describe this? I would describe this as intuitive, random. It is not something I'm in control of. The parameters for how this was generated is by chance, right? It's just the chance movements of my hand across the page. Here, we're going to experiment in a similar way, but with a few rules, with a little more deliberation. So again, I don't want to overthink my page or really spend a lot of time on evaluating what I'm doing. I don't think I could successfully make these marks with my eyes closed, so I do have to look at my page, but I'm trying to shut off the part of my brain that thinks it through. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm imposing a couple of rules. And the way that this page is going to work is that I'm going to draw a closed shape. And when that shape is closed, I'm going to spin off of that shape and draw one using the opposite direction. So I'm drawing in one direction, and then I'm switching directions. So you're doing these kind of constant switchbacks, covering the page with that strategy. So this is what that would look like. Here's the first pass. So I'm drawing a closed ellipsis. And these could be square. They don't have to be elliptical. I just favor ellipticals. And then you see I'm moving my hand now in the opposite direction. So this is based more on movement than on how it looks. I'm still allowed to follow my line and retrace my line and then spin off again in the opposite direction and make that closed ellipsis. Here I am tracing my line and then spinning off in the opposite direction and closing. So that's what this looks like. I'm going to pick up my second color and repeat this idea. So I'm making a closed shape here, and I'm following my line, spinning off, making another closed shape. These can be big, they can be small. I'm looping around, following this line, and then making another closed shape that spins off of a closed shape that I've already drawn. I'm making a closed shape that moves in the opposite direction. So I'm not thinking too hard about how this looks, but I am absorbed in thinking about these little rules I've set up for myself. So here, a rickety line, that's okay. And a closed shape. A closed shape that I've drawn in the opposite direction. I'm following this line down, 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 and a closed shape in the opposite direction of the one I've just drawn, and I'm just going to call that done. So, two different ways to make drawings that are not intellectually based. I'm not able to dedicate as much of my intellectual process to judging or evaluating my drawing when I'm making it a rules-based, process-based drawing like this. I'm not able to evaluate or censor how this looks because I'm not looking at it. I don't have access to my eyes, to my critical functions and my ability to evaluate this until I've looked at it. So we have two very different drawings, and let's create two very different paintings by going into these with paints and enhancing them somewhat.